Thanks for staying with us. The World Bank's latest report shows Nigeria ranks 146th out of 191 countries in GDP per capita, with an annual income of $6,207 in current international dollars. This figure is just 4.4% of Singapore's per capita income and 30% of Botswana's, Africa's leading country. Although Nigeria's economy is improving, the report stresses the need for faster and sustained growth to reduce poverty and improve living standards. Nigeria's population of about 233 million people generated a GDP of 277.5 trillion naira in 2024, which, if equally divided, would give each person around 1.2 million naira yearly. Despite this, widespread poverty persists due to unequal wealth distribution, inflation, high interest rates, and insecurity. Around 63% of Nigerians live in multidimensional poverty, with rural areas especially affected, where over 70% fall below the poverty line. The World Bank urges the Nigerian government to speed up social assistance programs aimed at helping vulnerable households, noting that only 5.6 million of the targeted 15 million have benefited so far. The report calls for a combination of macroeconomic reforms, social protections, and economic growth to improve livelihoods and reduce inequality nationwide. Our guest this morning is Mr. Segun Sopitan, Principal Partner, Woodridge and Scott Consulting. Good morning and welcome to the program, Mr. Sopitan.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, 146 out of 191. Let's hear you, how you feel about our ranking.
I mean, it's not new. You know, you begin to get used to these things after a while. Nigeria generally tends, in the last 20, 25, maybe even 30 years. I mean, we've always been on the wrong side of most of these rankings, unless they are negative rankings. So this is not news as far as I'm concerned. The issue that comes out of this, or the issues that arise from this, is perhaps what will be more critical. Why are we here? What can we do? You know, how come our per capita GDP is still what it is, in spite of all of the reforms over the last 2 years? Where is the impact of all of that reform on the average Nigerian? You know, those are the questions that this types of information provokes in me. And I hope that they provoke those same types of questions in the people that can do something about it, the policymakers, and provoke action that is different from what we've been doing so far. Because I think one of the things that this says is, contrary to what that report also says, one of the things that this says is it's not working. We shouldn't continue to deceive ourselves and lie to ourselves. It's not working. Whatever we're doing as a country, I'm not necessarily specifically talking about the policy direction of this administration particularly. I'm just saying, generally speaking, it's not working. You know, so we've got to ask ourselves, what can we do differently? So this is a report that the World Bank releases every 6 months. And I ran back through the previous reports all the way back to 2022, and you know what you find there is the story is not encouraging. There was one particular report that they said business unusual. That's what they were recommending for Nigeria. Here we are, we're still doing things as business as usual. You know, so plenty of things to consider, plenty of things to think about with regards to why this is so and what we can do.
Well, I find it almost like a flawed kind of metrics to measure what is happening in Nigeria. I think per capita income is even unfair to the larger population of Nigeria, because it tells us the general, the total income that we have divided by every individual in Nigeria, and they arrived at a figure which is about 1.2 million naira for every individual. And I'm thinking about the people who are able to get up to 1.2 million naira in a year in Nigeria. It means that every of those people is earning an average of 100,000 naira. Even our minimum wage is not up to 100,000 naira. So measuring the prosperity level of Nigerians by this GDP per capita seems unfair already to me. And I don't know why we're not talking more about household incomes and the things that give us the reality of what we really find in Nigeria.
Well, I mean, so the reason that the GDP per capita ranking, or that metric is generally computed and used to compare economic performance across the world is that it's not talking about income really, not personal income. It's talking about national income and national productivity.
Yeah.
And the assumption there's an underlying assumption behind that metric, and it's that if an economy is productive enough, then wealth will be created, or in fact, wealth has been created. So it's almost like a measure of what is happening. You're defining it as 1.2 million naira per annum or 100,000 per month. It's not the income. It's not talking about the income that people are earning. It's talking about the productivity of the country as it relates to each individual.
It mirrors the level of prosperity or otherwise of a people of any given country. So that's why my concern is like that.
Yes. So the thing is, it measures. If you look at what GDP is, you are talking about government spending, you are talking about consumer spending, you are talking about investment, you are talking about exports and imports. All of those in the economic areas of economic activity are the components of GDP. And what you're trying to do is to measure those things. And GDP per capita is basically saying the more of that you have for each citizen, the more likely it is that the citizens in that country are rich. So if you have a GDP per capita, for example, if you have a GDP of 1 trillion, let's use that as an example, as the president says he wants to achieve by 2030. If you have a GDP of 1 trillion and you have a population of, let's say, 200 million to make the math easy, it will mean that your GDP per capita is $5,000. Right? $5,000 nominal. Don't forget that the one that we're talking about now is purchasing power parity GDP per capita. The nominal GDP per capita is below $1,000. As we speak today, it's about 890 or something like that. Right? So if you have $1 trillion GDP and you have a population of 200 million, it means that the productivity of the country, generally speaking, trickles down to about $5,000 for each individual. It means that the investment, of government, the investment of private sector, the consumer spending, the amount of money spent, across the economy by consumers, all of that, about $5,000 of that is attributable or will affect each individual. So the higher the GDP per capita, the higher the likelihood that individuals in that country are wealthy, are doing well. So if you look at that metric now and take Sweden, take Norway, take Luxembourg, these guys they have GDP per capita well in excess of $100,000 per individual. So that will tell you that clearly that economy is doing well enough relative to the number of people that are in that country.
Yeah. Okay, so we're just looking at that GDP now, and I was also wondering what data the World Bank used to calculate this GDP. They're talking about 233 million. According to which census? What data are they using? How accurate is this?
Our population, within the population numbers that they've used, is an estimate. It's an estimate. So what they do, what these organizations, international bodies do, is that they're going to use only official data from the official government bodies responsible for releasing that data. In our own case, it's the National Population Commission. And the last census we did was 2006. So what everybody has done since then is to determine some sort of way of calculating the growth rate and then applying that growth rate since 2006 till today. So they're all estimates. So some people will tell you that Nigeria is currently 227 million. Some will tell you, no, we're 213 million. Some will tell you we're 230. They're all estimates based on growth rate, population growth rate per annum. And generally speaking, it's been agreed, amongst data in the data industry, in the research industry, that's around trending around 3% per annum. We add about 3% more people, people will die, people will get born, but the net effect is that we're growing about 3% per annum. So they've applied that growth rate to the census figures from 2006, and we arrived at these estimates. And that's the only thing we can do until we have another census, and until we have a better data management, data capture structure and infrastructure in the country, such that as people are dying and people are being born, they are in real time being added and removed from population numbers. Until that time, we'll have to conduct census more frequently.
Why is it that we're just comfortable with it? Is it not affecting our national planning, national economic planning especially, just to estimate the population that we have? Because if we had an accurate population, we would have known whether, okay, because of our economic conditions, people are dying more than they're giving birth and all that. Those kinds of things will come, as small as they are, but they will help us plan tomorrow to see where we need to have our strengths and all that. Why are we just careless about it? Census should be every 10 years or so, and since 2006 and now, we've not had a census. We've been talking about census, and it always coincides with an election year. They will move it to the front, and nothing ever happens, and we keep estimating, and we're just comfortable about it.
Well, I mean, it's not just the census. One of the biggest problems that we have as a country, and one of the biggest reasons that we have not progressed significantly, if at all,
data
in the last 25, in the last 30 years, is that we don't have data. Is that the policy making is not tied to reality, and in the few instances where we do have some data, we're even messing them up. Inflation, as we speak now, we're lying to ourselves with regards to inflation. So whatever policy decisions we make, off the back of the inflation numbers we have today, they are going to be flawed, because the inflation is not reflective of reality. So the census is just another one. So why are we careless about every other thing? And that's why, so for me, the real issue about this is that when the World Bank says the reforms are working, we need to keep at it, and then maybe we need to look at other areas that we can support the vulnerable, and all of that to capture, to counter the effect of the reforms. We've got to remember that economic reform on its own can never lead to development. I think it's crazy that the conversation around the development of Nigeria is focused on economic indicators. It's absolutely ridiculous. No matter what you do to your GDP, no matter what you do to your per capita GDP, inflation numbers, if you don't reform other sectors of the society, the country will not grow. So it's a good thing that the president has been very bold and courageous to do the thing that all the other presidents before him were afraid to do, attempted to do, and were forced to stand still, and they had to reverse themselves. It's a good thing he had the courage. But he also now needs to deploy that same level of courage to fundamental civil service reforms, to fundamental judicial reforms, to fundamental security services, not just police reforms, security architecture as a whole, reforms. We've got to change the way we run as a country in its entirety. We've got to have fundamental political structure reforms, governance reform. We've got to look at, things like when people talk about federalism, devolution of powers. Those are reforms that are critical if we are to change the trajectory of growth of this country. If this country is to develop at the rate that it can, to unlock the potential that it possesses, those other reforms must happen. If they don't, and we continue to reform, that's why you see that the reforms that we, attempt at the economic level, on the economic side, economic policy, fiscal, monetary policy, will never result in development, because the other parts of society are stunted, they are unbalanced. So nothing you do on the economic side will result in the outcomes that you are looking for, because they are being sabotaged, by the inadequacies in those other areas. So how will, for example, let me give you a simple example. how will serious capital flow into this country if you do not have a judicial system that can guarantee the owners of capital redress if there are problems? And problems are a natural part of life. It will happen. You are going to have disputes. So if I have trade disputes, investment problems, or business issues with some party somewhere, who perhaps even the government, right? I need to be sure that I will be able to get redressed quickly enough to save my money, to save my capital. If I'm unable to do that, capital will not come and development will not come. So it's not just about the numbers, it's not just about GDP, it's not about growing the GDP to $1 trillion, it's not about removing subsidy and floating the naira. It's nowhere near enough. We've got to have broad-based reforms across the entirety of the Nigerian society. Otherwise, it will be business as usual, and we will keep getting this marginal improvement that we have been seeing over the last 25 years.
But we seem to be playing the script of the World Bank and other IMF and all that. Should we continue playing that script, or should we jettison it and think of something local that can grow our economy better than what it is right now? The World Bank that is telling us that our reforms are good enough are the same ones that are telling us that we need to move faster. Faster in what regard? By making more money and impoverishing more people. What do we need to do? Should we continue to listen to the World Bank and IMF and other external influences, or a homegrown solution is better and faster? And which one do you propose?
I've always said that Nigeria needs to look eastwards. If we truly, genuinely want growth, we have to look eastwards. The solution to our development issues are not in the West. They are not in the hands of the World Bank. They are not in the hands of the IMF. They're not in the hands of the IFC. They're not in the hands of even the ADB and the AFDB and all of that. Those are Western-style neoliberal economic policy posturing institutions. We have to ask ourselves what China did. It's profoundly fundamental and foundational to look at the trajectory that Nigeria has traveled and compare it with the trajectory of the majority of the Asian economies that we see today. China, Japan, South Korea, before you start talking about Malaysia, Indonesia, these countries, we have to turn and understudy them and find out what they did. And in my personal studies, what I've found is that one of the things they did not do is that they did not rely on the World Bank and the IMF. They developed their own developmental models. They developed their own governance systems. They developed their own grassroots development programs that resulted in the eradication of poverty, in large enough swaths to bring about development. So this whole World Bank thing is not working. It's not going to work for us until we turn away from what we're doing now and do something radically different. It's going to be, we're just going to be celebrating little wins here and there for political reasons, for, say, oh, we support President this, you don't support President this, and we just banded these numbers around. No meaningful development and growth will happen, especially in the quantum that it can, based on who we are, what we have as a people. We're not scratching the surface because we're playing the game business as usual. We're listening to the World Bank, we're listening to the United States, we're listening to the EU. Those guys don't want us to develop. These things are not conspiracy theories. If you just think about it, just common sense and plain logic. Why would the countries that get their majority of their raw materials from us, why would they want us to process those raw materials? Because processing those raw materials will mean we will not have enough to give them, right? Why would they? So they're not going to give you policies that will help you unleash your productive and value-adding capacity in your local economy. They won't. So we have to look away from them and look eastward and do things very, very differently, And I've been saying this for a while, and I don't think anything has changed.
But it doesn't mean we should stop saying it. We can continue saying it until posterity at least will judge us right and say that we said it, but they did not listen. Okay, but I don't know what the the lowest hanging fruits are? Where do we start from to grow this economy? What's the first step to take?
For me, the lowest hanging fruit that we can achieve significant outcomes in that lowest hanging fruit, surprising as it might sound, is electricity. If this government had, from day one, with the same dedication, purposefulness, and intentionality that it applied to reforming, the subsidy regime, reforming the foreign exchange markets, if we had applied that same dedication, intentionality, energy, determination to fixing the electricity sector 2 years ago, I am absolutely certain that by now we would have been talking of 10,000 megawatts at least in distribution capacity, in the electricity that gets to the urban centers where they are most needed to drive development and growth. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. In this case, it was 2 years ago. The next best time to plant a tree is now. So right now, what the government needs to do in terms of the kind of activities that can result in explosive growth and explosive development is to focus on electricity. Just leave everything else. And I mean that figuratively. Obviously, you are going to continue to run the other issues and focus on whatever things you need to do. But let's take this electricity issue as a challenge. Let's fight it with everything we've got and give ourselves bold, audacious goals before 2027. Even if it means we're moving away from the national grid, there is not one single way to skin a cat. We don't have to keep talking about transmission, generation, and the distribution as a part of the value chain of the electricity system. Let's just be creative. There are so many ways to generate electricity and ensure that people have 24/7 uninterrupted power that is affordable. What are those ways? Does it involve bringing private sector players? Does it involve some sort of subsidy? If required, so be it. Whatever it is, we need to think and do the electricity thing differently. If we're able to fix that, then we will unlock potential. It's just a natural outcome, because what will happen is that all of the wasted time, lack of productivity, and the overly expensive productivity that we're generating will be addressed, and then people will just express themselves and do what they know how to do. Nigerians are hardworking, but we're hampered by the infrastructural challenges, and the societal issues, the governance problems, the corruption-related problems. Just unleash these Nigerians and watch us blossom. Nigeria is such a great country, but we're just holding ourselves back. So low-hanging fruit for me, as counterintuitive as it sounds, because somebody will say, no, electricity is not something you can fix quickly. I beg to differ. You can't fix electricity quickly enough to begin to achieve far better results than we're achieving now. So if you ask me what the low-hanging fruit is, I'll say it's electricity.
Well, the Aso Rock has already plucked that low-hanging fruit for themselves, and they're talking about 10 billion naira to put solar system in Aso Rock. We were just talking with a friend yesterday, and he told me that he just got a solar system with a good battery and everything, and it cost him 500,000 naira. It could carry refrigerator, computers, ACs, and all that in the apartment that he has taken. And we were just calculating, if Aso Rock had 10,000 rooms, which will include other rooms and then offices and all that, and every of these carried a personal solar system of 500,000, it will still amount to just 5 billion naira. But we are spending 10,000 billion to electrify Aso Rock. The rest of us can go to wherever we want to go to and get electricity. So it's unfortunate, but I do hope that this will be addressed, not just electricity and every other thing. A country is as prosperous as the quality of people that are there, people who are educated enough. I hope they will see to the education sector, they will see to the health sector, because health is wealth, and so many other critical ones that you have mentioned. But this is how far we can go today, talking about Nigeria's problems and trying to proffer solutions that seem to be landing on deaf ears, but we'll keep talking. Thank you so much, Mr. Sopitan, for coming on the show this morning.
Thanks for having me. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah. We've been talking to Mr. Segun Sopitan, principal partner, Woodridge and Scott Consulting, and we were looking at Nigeria's GDP per capita ranking low, about 146 out of 191. Up next is 2027 elections. Osun PDP senators endorse Tinubu for second term. We're going to be looking at that after this break. Stay with us.